Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sitrep podcast, your forward operations base for all things military and historical wargaming. I am your host today, Oriskany Jim, and today we are back to put a finale, finally, on our series of war games and discussions commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Kursk. The battle we're looking at today is part of Operation Polkovodets Rumyantsev, one of two big Soviet counteroffensives launched after the failure of the German offensive Operation Citadel that kicked off the Battle of Kursk on the 5th of July, 1943. This wargame was played between myself and my friend Piotr. We used a modified version of the Avalon Hill classic PanzerBlitz, and we had about 3 hours of the game recorded, but a recent hard drive failure took care of that. Nevertheless, I have recreated the game as best I can, and I hope to present a summary of the game here in today's episode. One of the big reasons I wanted to feature a wargame set in Operation Rumyantsev was to make the point that the Battle of Kursk did not end in the epic tank clash at Prokhorovka. Prokhorovka was only the end of Operation Citadel, the big German push in the Battle of Kursk. If I had $1 for every wargame casual and every wannabe historian who tried to tell me that Prokhorovka ended the Battle of Kursk, I would be Maharaja of the goddamn multiverse by now. Instead, Operation Rumyantsev was one of two big Soviet counteroffensives that were planned into the Soviet plan for the Battle of Kursk from the outset. These were not reactive counterattacks, where the Soviets reeled from the German blow, regained their balance, and then said, hey, you know what, we should probably take this opportunity to launch some kind of counterattack. These were always baked into the Soviet plan. Let the Germans hit us at Kursk, let them impale themselves on our defenses, and only after the Germans have been ground into last week's hamburger do we release fresh reserves in these all-out counterattacks. Now, as we see at the build-up to Prokhorovka, this Soviet plan didn't work perfectly, but for purposes of today's wargame, it works well enough. So, like I said, today's wargame is set up to recreate a small part of Operation Rumyantsev. This was the southern Soviet counteroffensive that would break the positions of Field Marshal Erich von Manstein's Army Group South, liberate Belgorod, push into Ukraine, and set up the fourth and final Battle of Kharkov. In the lead for the Soviets are elements of 6th Tank Corps, 1st Tank Army, commanded by one of my favorite Soviet generals of World War II, Mikhail Efimovich Katakov. Now, 1st Tank Army has had a really rough summer. As part of Nikolai Vatutin's Voronezh front, they were more or less ground up in the defensive battles during Operation Citadel phase of the Battle of Kursk. Then they were subsequently rebuilt and thrown right into the spearhead breakthrough element of Operation Rumyantsev, where they would be more or less destroyed again. They would subsequently be reformed yet again and finally granted guard status, but yeah, like I said, they had a really rough summer. The German formation in play today is the 2nd SS Das Reich Panzer Grenadier Division. Now, you guys know normally I try to avoid playing SS divisions in these games. We're including them today, however, because I wanted to get some Panthers on the board. As we know, none of Paul Hauser's 3 SS Panzer Grenadier divisions had any Panthers during the Operation Citadel phase of the Battle of Kursk. However, Das Reich was finally getting some Panthers in August 1943. I'm not including anywhere near the 77 Panthers the division has on record for August of 1943, just a few counters to get some Panthers in the game. Specifically, today's game takes place about 30 miles west of Kharkov. Actually, spearheads of 1st Tank Army had already driven well past Kharkov far to the south until they were counterattacked on 9 August 1943 by elements of 2nd SS Panzer Division and other German units. Now driving back north again, the Germans are in turn counterattacked by elements of 6th Tank Corps, 1st Tank Army in the battle we're going to see today at the town of Bodnikov. My friend Piotr has command of the Soviets, I'm playing the Germans. Let's head to the map table and see what the fates have brought us. Okay, we're looking at a PanzerBlitz map board, 33 hexes across and 20 hexes high. This makes it the same size as 2 standard PanzerBlitz map sheets as originally published in the original box set. Of course, this map has been custom drawn for this scenario, featuring some of the towns and villages just south of Bogodukov. The scale for our map is 200 meters per hex, which I know is not quite the same scale as you see in original PanzerBlitz. I do play with smaller hex sizes, and the rules and counters are adjusted accordingly. We'll go into the reasons and rules exceptions for that design change as the video progresses. Zooming into some of the units that are going to be involved in today's game, we are starting off with lead elements of 2nd SS Panzer Division, starting off with the bulk of their Panzer Regiment. Now, again, you see where we are including some Panthers. We see quite a few of the more typical mid and late war Mark IVs. We've got some H's, some G's, and some F2s. We also have some Tigers. Das Reich, of course, being an SS Panzer Grenadier Division, was one of the very few units blessed with their own integral Tiger unit. Moving on, we see elements of one of their Panzer Grenadier regiments. Now, I'm not trying to be offensive or controversial here. This was just the name of the unit that was there at the time. We're looking at a lot of the Hanomag half-tracks. Note that quite a few of them are carrying either 3.7 centimeter anti-tank guns, 5 centimeter howitzers. I even have one platoon of Hanomags here carrying the 8 centimeter mortars. So a lot of support going in with these grenadiers. Speaking of support, we see our typical Stugs of their Sturmgeschützabteilung, we see mortars of their tank destroyer detachment, lots of flak, armored cars for their reconnaissance, and a whole company of pioneers. Rounding out the support, we are looking at elements of 2nd SS Panzer Artillery Regiment, including some of the self-propelled stuff. We're looking at Hummels and Vespas. These are the 15 centimeter howitzers. These are the 10.5s. And then we have more batteries. One battery of 10.5s, one battery of 15.0s. These are towed. And we have the prime movers here if the German player wants to bring them on the table, or they can use them as off-board support assets at the player's discretion. Heading over to the Soviets, you're going to recognize a lot of these tank brigades. 22nd, 112th, and 200th Tank Brigade were all in our Verkopenie game last month. Again, Mikhail Efimovich Katakov, my favorite Soviet general. If you're watching me play PanzerBlitz on the Eastern Front, you're probably watching me play one of Katakov's units. Please note that all of these tank counters represent 5 tank half companies. I know that original PanzerBlitz tends to pit German 5 tank platoons versus Soviet 10 tank companies. I redesigned my tables, my rules, and my counters so that everybody has the same 5 tank units. Bearing that in mind, you can see how woefully understrength these guys are. Again, 1st Tank Army was chewed up in the defensive battles during the Operation Citadel phase of the Battle of Kursk. They were rebuilt and immediately hurled into the leading edge of the Rumyantsev counteroffensive. They got about 30 or 40 miles south of Kharkov, were then counterattacked, and now they're being launched into a counterattack. So, yeah, they've definitely had a very rough summer, and these units are really, really under strength. Also remember that every tank brigade included its own battalion of motorized rifle. Again, these are platoons, not companies, so you can, again, see how woefully under strength these guys are. They also don't have any trucks. That's because these motorized rifle guys are going to be riding into battle on the back of those tanks. They do have a pretty serious support package, though. Notice I've given them a complete Guards Mortar Regiment, and those of you familiar with the Eastern Front know that when you see Guards Mortar in a Soviet order of battle, you're talking about Katyushas. So yeah, there's a whole regiment here, 5 trucks per counter, 6 counters, 30 Katyushas. That's going to make a hell of a mess. Do notice that they are being loaned from another tank corps, so that's why they're still full strength. Same thing down here with their self-propelled artillery regiment. They're pretty much full strength, although they're Su-76s and 122s. These are pretty typical vehicles found in the Red Army at this time, so most PanzerBlitz games set in 1943 should include at least a few of them. We've got a headquarters section, we've got recon armored cars, we've got some brigade level mortars, some engineers, and some help from your friendly local air assault regiment, i.e. some Sturmovix for ground support. Notice that some of these guys are carrying bombs, and some of them are carrying 82mm anti-tank rockets. Okay, let's go ahead and get this game going. Here's the map before the game starts, and by the end of turn 1, suffice it to say, it's a lot more crowded. So what we used for this game was something of a phased entry approach, where I was able to bring in one of my German parent organizations, but only one of them, and then we would alternate. Piotr would bring in one of his parent Soviet organizations, and we would alternate back and forth until everyone was on the table. We did it this way so that neither side could just bum rush onto the table, seize all of the objective hexes, and then force the enemy to attack a semi-fortified position. That just wouldn't be fair. So my first parent organization that I brought aboard was my Panzer Grenadier Regiment, which I sort of split into two directions. Most of them headed up this road to the village of Kiani and seized that objective point, while the rest of it, actually only a small part of it, swooped up here and grabbed the objective point here in Zucchini. Piotr then brought 22nd Tank Brigade down across this rail line and set up a pretty powerful position threatening my right wing. You can't expect me to put up with that for very long, so I brought in the bulk of my Panzer Regiment here to Zucchini as well. This includes some of my Mark IVs, but all of my Panthers and Tigers. It becomes something of an arms race then, because Piotr brings in his whole 112th Tank Brigade to reinforce the 22nd, and we've got the makings of a hell of a tank battle here on the German right. 2nd SS Panzer Artillery Regiment is next. They set up a little fire base here on this wooded high ground. Piotr moves in and snatches up the objective hex here in the far northwest. I then follow up with all of my support assets. So I've got a little bit of a headquarters base of fire here back at Pavlovi. I've got my flag because I know he's got Sturmovix coming, so I got my flag ready to go here to support my main tank assault, while some of my lighter support elements support over here at Kiani. I also try to push pretty far forward with my Panzer reconnaissance. They don't quite reach this 4th objective hex. I do try to put it under a little bit of overwatch. It's not very strong, but at least I have eyes on it. Meanwhile, Piotr brings in all of his Katyushas here, a lot of his battalion-level mortars, some of it on high ground, some of it not. He brings in some of his brigade-level mortars here, some reconnaissance armored cars on that forward high ground of woods. This gives him a pretty good field of fire to call in artillery missions. And again, a 3rd whole tank brigade back here along this rail line. It looks like Piotr's going to make a pretty serious effort over here against the German right. Hey, I'm dug in concrete buildings with Panthers and Tigers, also some Stugs by this point. I say bring it. Turn 2 is actually a little anticlimactic. Not very much is spotted yet, so there's not a lot of exchanges of fire. There are no big artillery missions. We're still waiting on those Sturmovix to show up. Also, Piotr brought a lot of motorized rifles, and I brought a lot of grenadiers to the table. So, long story short, take your first shot. There's a lot of unloading to do. You'll notice that the 112th Tank Brigade and 22nd Tank Brigade have sort of spread out a little. This is because Piotr is trying to avoid overstacking issues as he unloads. I should note that in these smaller 200-meter hexes, the stacking limit in a hex is only 3 units. So if you have 2 transport units trying to unload, you're going to cause a stacking violation with all 4 units in that same hex. I've also tried to reinforce my overwatch position, although I think I'm already a little too late on that because 2 sections of reconnaissance armored cars and a platoon of Mark IVs sounds kind of scary until you find yourself looking at the bulk of a Soviet battalion. One last thing to consider, a lot of these Soviet units are in PanzerBlitz gullies, so it looks like they're lined up right out in front of me, but they're not. They're actually kind of below the ground level a little bit, and I cannot see them. Some of them are visible to me, the ones that aren't in the gully hexes, and I do have a lot of units that do have them in clear line of sight, but I don't want to reveal my position yet. Notice that all of my big tank units there are in either concrete or wooden buildings. They're nice, hidden, and secure for the moment. I don't want to give away my position until I have a much, much bigger target. It's turn 3 when this game really cooks off in a big, big way. Piotr hits me with the whole 112th and 27th Tank Brigade and a sizable part of the 200th Tank Brigade. Basically, he hits me with the bulk of an understrength Soviet tank corps, more or less all at once. Let's zoom in a little bit because there's a lot going on here. We've got T-34s coming down this way, coming down that way, and pretty much coming straight at me. He knows he's going to get clobbered, but once he forces me to take opportunity fire, my units are now all spotted. He leads off this assault with a big blind artillery barrage with his battalion mortars, his brigade mortars, and his regiment of Katyushas. He doesn't have anything spotted, so a lot of it's going to drift. You see where this mission drifted, this mission drifted. However, this mission landed pretty much on target. Wasn't too happy about that. And then again, he made this big charge right at me. And yeah, he took his lumps with all my opportunity fire. But he does have me spotted now, and as you can see, he outnumbers me quite a bit. Piotr finishes off his turn 3 with a series of close assaults, most of which are kind of shrugged off, but one of them does disperse a lot of my units down here. When you see the counters kind of cocked off on an angle like that, that means that they're disordered, dispersed, pinned down. I'm going to have to rally those guys next turn. By the way, I should note that we are using Arab-Israeli War morale rules, so if those guys don't rally, they might be in serious trouble next turn. And here come the Sturmovix. So he had his bomb units come in here to bomb the engineers I had in the center of town. I wasn't too worried about them. I was more worried about these Sturmovix carrying rockets that were coming after my Panthers. So here are my flak units. We are using the standard Panzerleader anti-aircraft rules. They don't do very much. They do manage to drive off one Sturmovik, but it's not enough to save most of the tanks I have there in the northern part of my village. So what Piotr's doing here is he's actually hitting me several times in a turn, and this is how you win at PanzerBlitz. He's hitting me in the beginning of the turn with a targeted artillery barrage because my tank platoons are now spotted. He then hits me in the middle of his turn with point-blank direct fire from his T-34s. I've killed about 35 or 40 tanks already, but he's got about 50 more. And again, at these very close ranges, Soviet guns hit almost as hard as German guns. He then hits me at the end of his turn with close assaults, all this infantry that's piled up there. Now, the reason that's so devastating in PanzerBlitz is that if you're able to disperse an enemy unit early in your turn, and then are able to attack that same unit in a subsequent phase of your turn sequence, you get huge bonuses for attacking a dispersed target. This is how PanzerBlitz enforces and encourages combined arms tactics. It's one thing to smash an enemy unit very hard in one big, sort of inelegant attack. You get much better economy of force and much better results if you ping him with an airstrike, ping him with artillery, ping him with direct fire, ping him with an overrun, ping him with a close assault. You get to attack that same unit 5 times, and those bonuses just compound over and over again further on in the turn sequence. One funny thing that happens over here on my right is Piotr apparently has a real hard-on for my Tiger platoon. You see the 1, 2, 3, at least 15, maybe 20 tanks destroyed just trying to set up an overrun. He lost 20 tanks making this maneuver thanks to my opportunity fire from 2 platoons of Mark IVs. I did have 2 batteries of Stugs in there, and of course I had some Tigers in this hex here. But after losing 20-25 tanks, he still had 15 more. He was able to then overrun my Tigers, and yeah, that was the end of my Tiger platoon. Turn 5, and things are definitely not looking good for me over here in this little battle of Zucchini. Clearly this is going to be the big crucible for this game. So what I was trying to do was perhaps belatedly get some reinforcements over to that part of the table. Not all of them made it, however. They ran into all kinds of problems. Namely, opportunity fire from this position here, then the airstrike came in. Now notice, there's only 3 Sturmoviks there. The 4th one had to return to base due to damage from my flat guns, and they have expended all of their ordnance. No more bombs or rockets, but they still carry 23mm autocannon, and they get 4 shots with them per the Panzerleader rules for airstrikes. We just brought those Panzerleader airstrike rules and brought them back into PanzerBlitz. Now, 23mm autocannon is definitely going to be a threat to any unarmored vehicles, and certainly a threat to light armored vehicles. I think that was a section of half-tracks I lost there. So, yeah, all of my last-ditch reinforcements are not making it across that killing ground there between those swamps and forests. Another thing that happens on turn 5 is Piotr is finally able to drop his big Sunday punch with all of his artillery and rockets. Now those Katyushas did take part in that blind fire mission that we saw on turn 3. However, those Katyushas are subject to a special rule. They take an entire turn to reload. Turn 4, the targeted barrage against my spotted units was all mortars. Here, however, on turn 5, he's got everything reloaded and all of my units are fully spotted. So, long story short, take your second shot. My Germans here in Zucchini, yeah, they're hating life. Everything in there is either burning or pinned down. And yeah, those close assaults are really starting to creep in. In fact, one hex has already been completely emptied now. Yeah, the wall has finally cracked here at Zucchini, and it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to hold that right-wing position for very long. Turn 6 is when the German position at Zucchini finally gives up the ghost. I pretty much have lost everything here. You see where these motor rifle and submachine gun platoons are now in the actual town hexes. They've taken the objective point, and long story short, take your third shot, I have now lost that battle. I was able to escape with some of my units. I did have a Mark IV platoon that was pinned down. He rallied and then was able to use the split move and fire rule. He got back to the safety of that tree line. Also, some of my reinforcements managed to finally make it across the table. So I do have something of a secondary position here to protect this objective hex down here at Pavlove. Another thing you might have noticed, however, is that all of my mobile flak batteries are now knocked out. When they fired against the Sturmoviks from those wooden positions, they revealed their positions to all these T-34s, and yeah, T-34s versus unarmored half-tracks, that's going to be the end of that story. Now, I still hold Pavlove, and I still hold Kiani. However, seeing that I have now lost my third objective point, I tried to get a little bit more aggressive here at this crossroads, which contains the fourth objective point. That doesn't work very well at all, because again, we've got Soviet airstrikes coming in, we've got Soviet tanks. My artillery was able to blast an entire motor rifle company completely out of existence, but yeah, it's an expensive battle for the Soviets, but they're definitely winning that one as well. We're now on turn 7, and my Germans are definitely in full damage control mode. I tried to launch a bit of a Grenadier and Pioneer close assault against these Soviet tanks in these woods. That didn't work out very well for me at all, especially once Piotr was able to counter-overrun with 2 batteries of Su-122 assault guns. So Su-122 assault guns versus German infantry in the open, you do the math. That was definitely the end of any chance I had of taking this central crossroad objective hex. You can see here where all of my Panzer Recon stuff is starting to fall back, and my remaining forces here in Kiani are setting up a positional defense. We're definitely in full-scale defensive posture over here on the German left. Pretty much the same thing over here on the German right, where I've been able to fall back and reconsolidate some remnants of 2nd SS Panzer Regiment into a bit of a defensive battle group. I'm not entirely sure what they're going to be able to stop, because Piotr is starting to get bold with some remaining companies of 112th and 22nd Tank Brigades. Looks like he might be making a play for this objective hex back here at Pavlove, but I'm not really sure about that. My remaining tanks, however, have continued to inflict really heavy losses on Piotr's tanks, especially as they cross this open killing ground here. So, as significant as Soviet numbers have been, they're not limitless, and it looks like I'm finally starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. My artillery was also able to spot and destroy some Katyushas up here. Back when some of my Panzer reconnaissance was way back here, we were able to peekaboo behind the Soviet line there, call in an artillery mission, and at least sort of thin out a little bit of that Katyusha fire. However, we're now on turn 7. The Katyushas have reloaded for a 3rd salvo, and that was pretty much the end of one of my big self-propelled artillery batteries back here on my artillery hill. So here we are at turn 8, the official end of the game, and I think by this point both Piotr and I realized that we weren't going to take any more objective hexes, so we started to draw back, play a little bit of conservative defense, and consolidate the positions we already had. You can see where he pulled the remainder of his T-34s back off of that ridge. Those T-34s are just fast enough where this time I wasn't able to get any kind of decent opportunity fire on him, and he was able to pull those forces back without incurring any additional losses. Meanwhile, he was also able to mop up the rest of my Forlorn Hope infantry force that I rather unwisely sent into that open field. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of the game. Looks like Piotr owns 3 objective points, I only own 2. So here are the 3 Soviet points. There's 1 there. He does own those central crossroads, and he was able to take Zucchini from me. Meanwhile, I still hold Pavlove, and I still hold the objective hex here in Kiani. So again, it's going to be a 3-2 Soviet victory. Over here, you can see all of the losses that both sides sustained. Clearly, this was a very hard-fought battle. A well-earned victory for my opponent. Piotr, you definitely did a great job in this game, and you totally deserve this epic win. Alright guys, there you have it. A well-fought victory for Piotr and his Soviets. It was a pretty close game. We wound up with 3 objective hexes in Soviet hands, 2 in German hands, and that 3rd objective hex remained kind of in play almost until the end of the game. To be honest though, I definitely misemployed a lot of my tank platoons, especially my Panthers, setting them up in positional defense in that eastward Soviet village. I'm not sure what possessed me on that one. Chalk it up to the fog of war. This was a mistake that my friend Piotr definitely took good advantage of. He hit that position with the full strength of 2 Soviet tank brigades, with artillery support, with Katyusha support, even Sturmovik support, and once he took that village with its objective hex, yeah, that was pretty much the end of the game. Like I said, this game is finally going to put a cap on our 80th anniversary look at the Battle of Kursk. We definitely wanted to include that because, again, the Battle of Kursk includes these 2 big Soviet counteroffensives. Therefore, the Battle of Kursk extends well into August 1943 and makes the Battle of Kursk truly the largest battle in human history, even bigger than a lot of people tend to consider. And that's where we're going to leave it for today, folks. Thanks very much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Please remember to hit that notification bell. Also, please consider joining the Sitrep Podcast Discord. There is an auto-accept invitation link to our Discord in the description of this video. Join our community, see what everybody's up to, and best of all, show us what's happening on your hobby table. But for now, this is Risky Jim with the Sitrep Podcast. We are rounds complete for another episode, and as always, Tango Mike for watching.